We breaking bread, yeah. We breaking bread, yeah. We breaking bread, yeah. One conversation at a time. We breaking bread, yeah. We breaking bread, yeah. We breaking bread, yeah. One conversation at a time.
The Breaking Bread Village.
One conversation at a time.
The Breaking Bread Village.
One conversation at a time.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Breaking Bread Village. I'm really excited to have this conversation today. We are going to be talking about cancel culture because I have some questions about it and I wanted to bring on some friends to talk about it with me. So I'm going to go ahead and bring them on screen. We have a couple more people that will hopefully show up, but right now these are our guests and I'm excited about it. So let me bring on Carlos. How are you?
Good. How you doing?
I am great.
Great. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. Jason, hey.
How you doing?
I am wonderful. I'm really excited about this conversation. Hey, Taylor.
Hi there. How are we doing? Actually,
Awesome. Thank you. And let me add on James. Hey, James.
Hello, everyone. How are you doing?
Wonderful. Well, we are waiting on Z and Sarah, but for right now, we're going to go ahead and get started up with this conversation because I'm really excited about it because there's been so much stuff going on in the media right now. And every time I look up, on YouTube or what other social media platforms, people are getting canceled, right? So I want to have the conversation and kind of ask you guys what your take on it was. And first of all, I just kind of want to know each person's stance on cancel culture and what you feel about it. So I'll go ahead and just kind of start in order. Carlos, if you want to kind of give your thoughts on cancel culture.
Oh yeah, most definitely. I think cancel culture is something that is quote unquote a fade or fad for right now. I think, to be honest with you, it's more accountability conversations, more so than counseling someone. I think the ability to truly counsel someone or take someone away in our capitalist society is tough to do without really impacting their wallet. But it's tough for you to do it if you're not really part of their target demographic anyway. I think a lot of my stance when it comes on cancel culture is just understanding where it came from. That it came from disenfranchised folks and disenfranchised folks trying to hold people accountable for some of their rhetoric and stance on things, but at the same time being able to try to stop their way of actually making a living or redirect some of their way of thinking. But those things are going to in the future. But nevertheless, I think it has its merit. But to truly say it has a true impact, if you're not part of that demographic, if you're not the people in which it's really going to have that change, or you're not sitting in that boardroom, it's tough to truly say you cancel somebody. You might draw attention to it, but it's tough to say you cancel anyone.
Okay. All right, Jason, what's your thoughts on it?
So I think there's two types of ways that you can talk about cancel culture. The first one is I can cancel you anytime I want to. Not that I would, but I'm saying I can cancel you anytime I want to and walk away and not deal with whoever I want to not deal with, right? And so can you, and so can anybody else. I think where cancel culture, and there's some other questions that are probably going to come up, but where cancel culture gets dangerous is when we have a power or an entity like the media that can terribly tear a person's life apart without any cause or reason if they want to. They could right now come out and say, I did this or that, and 90% of the world would believe I did this or that, whether I did it or didn't do it or had anything even around it. So cancel culture in that way is toxic. But that's a bigger picture. That's power. It's not just you and I being activists and going, I'm not going to Menards because they make me wear a mask. So I'm all about that kind of thing, like boycotting a business because they don't treat people properly or whatever. But canceling people without, through the media, I think is a different story.
Okay. Hey, Sarah, welcome.
Hi, sorry I'm late.
No, that's okay. So what's your take on cancel culture?
So for me, I think kind of came out of the need of people who really wanted to see justice done, where I think there's a peacekeeping culture where like, oh, just don't say anything. Like, stuff has happened. Well, let's not make a big deal out of it. And then, you know, because I grew up, my mom, my grandma, you know, my relatives like that, it was always just keep quiet. It's too much. And so I think as like my generation and the younger generations come up, there's that natural pendulum swing to the opposite extreme, which is to say, no, shut it down. We're calling everybody out. We're calling you out. We're canceling you. So I think it's just a huge pendulum swing from that need of justice and being told to be quiet. I don't agree with it. I think like extreme pendulum swings are dangerous. I'm more for call out culture where, hey, this is what happened. How are we going to address it? And actually just having the conversation, which I think we bypassed because for so long we were told not to have the conversation at all. So for me, I think I agree. It's toxic. It's dangerous. I mean, any one of us could get called out for a negative behavior and have our whole world blown up. But I also think that there should be, you know, we have freedom of choice, we have freedom of speech, but we also don't have freedom of consequence. And so if you say something problematic, if you do something problematic, that should be addressed. If you continue to say and do problematic things with no consequence, then I have the right to vote with my money and not buy your product anymore or go to your store or listen to your music. And that's something that I choose to do on my own, but it's not something that I get on things like, everybody put them on blast, like they're done. Because so that's where I'm at with that.
Okay. James?
Hi, yes. So as coming from the print media background, our transmission of messages was a little bit different because we are restricted by the things we can and cannot say. Things must be sourced. We, as print media specialists, we tend to be a lot more facts-based because of these kind of consequences. Now, as media has changed over the last 20 to 30 years, we have more active participants in the media, with social media, Twitter being a way that we are all essentially media. It's given the power back to disenfranchised communities, disenfranchised subgroups of people to be able to exact their feelings, to allow companies, business people, etc., to be affected by their voice. And we've seen the result of that in our culture, to where a lot of times we miss due process. We don't want to get into too many both sides or hearing both sides of situations. Too often we would like to say factual based, but when you've given everyone the opportunity to go viral, to make a claim that can damage someone's finances, that can damage someone's reputation, it is important to know that everyone is not necessarily understanding the rules and the consequences of the things that we put out. A lot of times in cancel culture, we've seen folks, unfortunately, lose their livelihood because of prejudice, bigoted things that in the past, things that used to be acceptable are no longer acceptable as society changes. So unfortunately, it's necessary.
Okay. And then Taylor?
I'm having some technical difficulties. I don't know if y'all can hear me well. I can't hear any of you guys very well, so.
Oh, we can hear you really well.
Okay, that's good. That makes however 5 of us, but not me. Okay, well, I guess my idea of cancel culture, I'm not a big fan of it. I think that it stifles the potential for learning and growth for everybody. I see cancel culture being used as the idea of only being celebrities and big name people, but cancel culture happens everywhere, really. At universities, businesses, just like regular people are being canceled within their own community. So I see that as another problem of the same breed, I guess.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I really and I appreciate you guys for all of your input in regards to it, because I just really wanted to ask this question because every time I look around now, people are getting canceled, right? And like Taylor said, it's not just celebrities anymore. It's people, in our communities, or you have pastors getting canceled. You have businesses getting canceled. And, I wanted to really ask, and I think Carlos kind of touched on it a little bit, but, do we feel like it's effective? Because, and I guess I have two parts in that. Do we think it's effective? And do we think that it's kind of gone too far? In regards to the mob mentality, because as soon as somebody gets on that train, it goes, people blow up, and nobody even knows any type of facts about it, right? We just see somebody post something, or we see someone put it out, and then we all jump on it and say, oh yeah, they're canceled because that person said it. So do you guys think that it's gone too far in regards to the whole mob mentality? Because that's how I see it. Sometimes it's more of a mob as opposed to an idea.
Yeah, I think it does go too far in a lot of ways. I think the intent behind it isn't necessarily wrong, but I think the lack of empathy, you're talking about social media and just how that's grown over the decades. And there's this like, well, I can say whatever I want because they're a whole other thing away from me. And there's lack of consequence on your part for your reaction as well, for responding to something. I think it bypasses so many steps in like addressing an issue. So I'm not a Christian. There is a verse in the Bible in Matthew that talks about if a brother or sister sins against you, go to them one-on-one and say, hey, you did this to me, or you did this, and it's a problem.
Sure.
And then if they resolve it, then awesome, you guys are good, and then you can move on. And then if they don't respond well, then you take 2 or 3 witnesses and
Sure.
address it, and then you take it to the church and stuff, and then they say excommunicate, which is what I would say the biblical version of cancel. And there's steps along the way, and I feel like people are just so hungry for justice and for some sort of consequence for something that they bypass that because there's no personal connection with it. You're just allowed to let your feelings go with it.
So I think there's 2 things to that. So you're absolutely right. I think the mob mentality comes from a lack of ability to critically think, and that's systemic. That comes from education not being education anymore. And so we have kids that grow up not learning to think critically. If somebody says to you, oh, that guy's a jerk, most kids nowadays, or younger people, just go, yeah, he's a jerk because so-and-so said he's a jerk. And that's where that mob mentality comes from. And the other part of that too is that if you have a person,
I cannot hear anybody.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I think if you have a person though that is struggling to relate to other people, and that person they make a bad move, like one bad move, right? Like you were saying, they make one bad move and everybody's hungry for justice, but they don't really even know what justice looks like. They just have this idea that they're angry and there needs to be justice. And so that person said something I don't like. Let's all gang up on him. He's canceled. And I think that's crazy.
Yeah.
I would say that I would say that it's not just lack of critical thinking, it's also a lack of empathy, because that guy's being a jerk, but you're also thinking about like, why was it that way? Like with my son, it's not everybody's a bad guy because they're a bad guy flat. Like we're all the hero in our own story, but we're also a villain in one else's. And there's a reason why people react the way they do. Maybe it's because they are a jerk, but maybe they're having a bad day or they misstep. And so it's critical thinking and lack of empathy that I think is, and then it's just freedom with your emotions.
Sure. Carlos?
I think at times, though, what we're doing is we are holding the quote unquote mob or social media more accountable than that person and their actions. I think one of the things that happened with cancel culture, and again, I come from the place of I think it's one of those things that people would jump on. I think you both are correct in your breakdown when it comes to critical thinking and empathy. But I think what we have to really understand is like, where did this really start from? Where did this come from? And I think at times we have to, if we want people to have the freedom of speech and we want people to be able to post what they want to post on social media, like we stated earlier, that there are consequences to it. But I think more so the mob mentality really underscores or underlines how the way people are starting to unite and come together. Now, I truly believe people have to learn for their own. It's almost like when you go out to vote, you have to really do your own digging on your research and feel as if it links into who you are. But the overall thing that really impacts cancel culture is really bringing people up to say, hey, you need to be held accountable for this. Now, if others don't do the research and the mob becomes more effective and now people are sharing things that are inaccurate, yeah, we need more accuracy when it comes to cancel culture. But cancel culture in of itself is a cool thing to do. At the end of the day, if you, like I said earlier, if you're not really sparking a change or sparking a discussion that allows people to then go back and do a mea culpa, a person that goes back and then learn from their mistakes, then, what are we doing? I think, and the last thing I say is this: when you are in a position for you to know better, you got to do better. And I think at times when cancel culture really rises up to come available and really like rears its head out with the mob comes about is when people who we have an abundance of respect for or high expectations for. But at the end of the day, cancel culture is really just performative. It's not so much action when it comes from those smaller people compared to those people that are quote unquote of higher status. And so at the end of the day, it's really performative.
Not sustainable.
Okay.
Yeah, your first question, I'm begging for you to ask that first question you sent earlier.
Oh, is it effective?
No. The first one, do you consider it shaming?
Oh,
Because
yes. Yeah.
what Carlos is talking about. So if I'm doing something, Carlos, I think this is what you're getting at. If I'm doing something that I should feel ashamed of, then somebody can shame me and I can react negatively, or I can choose to learn that maybe I should look at it. Says more about me than it does you if you cancel me and I feel ashamed, right? Because you had asked she had asked if shaming somebody for when their remarks were exposed, right? So if I did something that deserves being canceled, then that's my fault. That's not the person's fault who cancels me or the people's fault. If I'm some big celebrity and I say something really stupid and it gets me shunned by the community, maybe I need to think about what I'm saying. Right.
So for me, and then James, I'm gonna let you put something in on that too. But for me, recently I have seen people get canceled for things they said 20 years ago or 30 years ago. And I have a problem with that sometimes because I know for myself personally, I have evolved so much, right? And I just remember certain things that, I may have said that may have been offensive to somebody. I mean, even if you look back at TV shows, right, 20 years ago, the content on the TV shows wouldn't be allowed nowadays, right? I mean, we've seen that. So the whole point is that as a society, we have evolved as well. So I just have a problem sometimes with people purposely digging back decades to purposely humiliate or shame somebody. You know what I'm saying? Now, if you said something just yesterday and for a fact that's something that is not acceptable by our society and whoever decides that, I still don't know. But if that seems unacceptable, then yes, that's different. But if you said something 30 years ago and you were, 20 years old, and now, you're older and wiser and experience life a little bit differently. And, you may have changed your views on a lot of things. I don't know if I agree with that. So James, I'm going to let you chime in there.
We've seen in a lot of these cases to where folks would consider these situations shaming, different levels and different careers, and you are seeing these marginalized communities say in certain cases where these aggressors or offenders are teachers, are police officers, are our lawyers, doctors, judges, so on and so forth. They
Sure.
are, when they are going back in time, they are also looking at what possible harm those words, those statements, those type of beliefs may have had in the past, and that's where we see a lot of fervor. That's where we see the ginning up of the mob mentality that I know some folks are a little bit weary with, and I tend to be as well, just because people's rate of growth is something that I know culturally we are learning to embrace more. We are
Sure.
being, we are simultaneously participating in a mob culture, but we are also simultaneously leaving paths for people's education. It really just depends on a lot of the attitudes, the repercussions. You'll see these situations as typified in the Steven Jackson versus Deshaun Jackson behavior. Deshaun Jackson, the NFL football player, made anti-Semitic statements. He did not know and had not previously been aware of the fact that tropes even exist. He was educated by teammates, friends, family members, coworkers in tandem with the mob mentality to cancel him. He therein responded positively. He retraced his statement,
Sure.
apologized,
Right.
and he was offered a way back into where we see the opposite happen for a Steven Jackson, someone who, instead of backing off the statements, instead of taking the opportunity with a Don Lemon on CNN to backtrack and to apologize to avoid what the eventual mob mentality, the essential mobbing of his statements, he in fact, instead of changing direction, he leaned stubbornly into it. We are seeing these on smaller scales culturally all over the country with actual folks who are participating in social media groups with a sole intention of ginning up said mob mentality. So
Sure.
we have multiple things at play when we do talk about cancel culture, mob mentality, and its effectiveness.
And so, oh, go ahead, Jason. I'm sorry. Was that you, Jason, trying to talk?
No,
No,
no.
no, I was just listening.
Oh, Carlos, was that
So,
you?
yeah, that was me. So I was going to say, I mean, it works both sides, right? Like if we feel as though there's a side that is cancel culture that can limit someone's either earning power or earning or limit someone's say so or reputation based on a statement or a stance they may take. You also have people that are counterculture counselors, right? Or people that just support people because they have been canceled that will then still support them. And so what I say overall is that when we say too far, what do we mean or what are we looking at when we say too far? And then when we say a mob mentality, there can always be two mobs. Those that was just support because they want to be counterproductive or counter to the movement, and those that really truly want to cancel. I think in the middle is where you normally find, and I'm sorry, Sarah, I think normally in the middle, that's where you find call out culture. On
Yeah.
both sides of the mob, you have two mobs going at it, and in the middle, you find a person. Okay, let's call it out. Let's see what it is. Let's understand what our transgressions are. Let's evolve, and then let's move past it. Because people will always have that decision to either move past the situation and grow, or stay with it, and then let it linger and eat away at you. And so with council culture, it just depends on how much energy that we want to give it, but then also how much does it truly impact that individual? Because
Right.
once that mob goes away and goes to sleep, this individual person has to understand what I keep it up. I mean, I know a lot of friends that are part of the LGBTQA plus community that are stubborn to the fact about the Chick-fil-A stands, but they still have somebody else go out and buy them a sandwich, right?
Right.
They won't take get their dollars, but they'll still partake with the food, right? And so
Right.
that's what I mean by just understanding how deep or how entrenched are you when it comes to said thing that quote unquote offended you or offended someone you may know.
Right. And see for me, I agree with all your points, and I look at it, to your point, James, in regards to, if this is your job and your job is to be, have no bias and kind of be there for all people, and then you say certain things, then yes, I take some issue with that. But sometimes for me, I don't know. I'm just gonna like when I used to live in Toledo, and Toledo is a very big Polish community. They have a very big Polish community, and the people there in Toledo would always use a certain term regarding to themselves as Polish people as something that I learned later that was very offensive to Polish people if someone else said it, right? But because I was always around them and I didn't know that that was seen as offensive, I would say it with them because that was like almost it seemed like a term of endearment, So with that said, when I went to another community and I used that, somebody was very offended by it because they're like, that's very offensive, and I was so apologetic because I had no idea. So for me, and I'm saying that to say sometimes people do things not knowing that it is highly offensive to other people. But what happens is before they even get a chance to be educated, to have any type of redemption, it's put out there. And I mean, can you really come back from it? I mean, I look at things where, people with due process, even in the law, if someone accused somebody of being a child molester, that's one of the things that people jump. And when we hear that, it's like, I'm not dealing with that person, whatever. And then what if it comes out that that person isn't? But we've already put it out there. You know what I'm saying? So my question is, is there an opportunity for redemption for people, being uncanceled, so to speak? Is there any opportunity for that? Because once it's put out there, how do we come back from that to allow that person to be uncanceled, so to speak?
Well, I'm a Christian, so I think first I can be uncanceled in that way, which is, I think, the most important way. But beside that, I think actions do speak louder than words too. If you screw up once and people consistently see you making an action in the right direction, trying to make right, trying to, it might take extra effort, more than you should have to give. But I think if you really want redemption, you can get it no matter, where you are in your life. I think that's true.
Okay. Anybody else on that?
You too.
So for me, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Okay. For me, I would say, as far as redemption goes, it's what you were talking about just a minute ago about the cancel culture and like this very intense. I think it depends on what motivation, like what do you want out of cancel culture? Why are you doing it? Is it instant gratification because I'm mad right now and I want immediate gratification?
I think a lot of times it is that. For me personally, I see that a lot where people just want some kind of attention at that moment and don't even think it through.
Right. And so for me, because you're in the middle of the ground, that call out culture, I want to call people out. I want to hear what they have to say. I want to see some form of change because I want change. I don't want to just be mad. If I wanted to be mad, I'd still talk to a lot of other people that I've personally canceled. But like, and then to your other point about, the Christian faith and like the forgiveness and the things that go in there. If you're going into it going, I want to redeem this situation. I'm calling you out because you're having problematic things that are offensive to me and to other people, and I want to see change. I want you to correct it because I care. And I think that there's a lack of that right now with the cancel culture because it's just like instant gratification, and that's where I was saying about lack of empathy. If we're not empathetic, if we're not, why are you doing this? Where's this coming from? How can we help you correct it? I think for me,
do we feel? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sarah. I just want to know. I want to ask you guys. I mean, you specifically, Sarah. Do you think that people really are looking for redemption for, like, do you think that the people that are canceling people, do you think they're really looking for them to be educated or to know, or do you think, because what I see a lot of times is the mom mentality, they sick them and then they throw them away. Do you really think that people are looking to be empathetic and teach? And I'm just asking, kind of like both sides of thinking of this.
I think the motive behind cancel culture is just that, like, I'm mad and you're done. Like, I'm cutting you off, we're shutting it down. And I think that there are people who need that kind of validation in their life, that, like, I was right in this, and I shut it down, and I don't buy their products anymore. And I think that that's a personal gratification, but it doesn't help everyone. It doesn't contribute to the whole, which is, I think, and so that's the mob mentality, is you get one person who's like, I'm mad. Yeah, me too. Like, I had a friend in high school. I was mad at one friend. And then she was like, yeah, I'm mad at him too. And I said, why? And she goes, well, because you're mad at him. I said, well, that's dumb. Like, I know why I'm mad at him. You have no idea why I'm mad at him. Like, that doesn't help anything. You're just mad. So I think that's the big part of
it. I don't know if this is on subject or not. Kinda.
It's okay.
Do you think we have a how dare you culture problem? I mean,
of course.
Like if I do something, I guess this is what I was getting at earlier too. If I do something wrong, and somebody calls,
I think we lost them.
Yeah, I think this.
I'm back now.
There we go.
Okay, there you go.
If I do something wrong though, and somebody calls me out, and I love the idea of call people out culture, call out culture, because that's important. But if somebody calls me out for what I did wrong, how dare you? I'm offended now. Like, I don't have a right to get offended just because offense is not necessarily a bad thing. And if you think biblically, shame is not a bad thing. Shame keeps us from acting a fool sometimes.
Right.
The idea of what's going to happen to me if I act like that is not always a bad thing either. So I guess I'm just wondering, is that a big part of this? Like, people are like, how dare you? And then everybody, how dare you together. And it becomes that mob of, let's just shut this person off completely.
So are you asking how dare you from the person that's being called out? Like, how dare you call me out? Okay.
Yes. How dare you call me out? Yeah.
Okay. James, Carlos, anybody?
We've seen the fact that our 24-hour media cycle tends to trend to, as soon as the next situation occurs,
yes,
the situation is no longer in the public sphere, and folks are allowed to go on and continuing, which is why we've discussed whether being canceled is effective. It will. I notice we've been speaking in biblical terms. While God does not rank sin, the sinner does. So it will always depend on culturally where we are, to politically where we are, to what we view as how dare you, to you are a monster and you are forever canceled. It usually does depend on the sin. We've noticed whether there is an opportunity for redemption.
Yeah.
Cases we've discussed there being a counter cancel culture, to where it is a tit for tat situation.
Sure.
You idealistically, I disagree with you, so whenever I can get some points against you, I will take it. And we are counting and ranking points on a cancel situation. So we can see uncancelization, or you can be uncanceled depending on your sin. But it will also depend on the nature and the parameters of which you were canceled.
And what else is going on, right? I mean, we see things where, people will be really upset, and then the next thing will happen and they totally forget that that's even happening. Yeah. We have very short attention spans these days. So that's also a part of it too. I just really think about, I always try to look at stuff personally, right? In regards to myself, how I deal with people. So, I think about things with myself on how, how would I want to be treated if I made a mistake? We all make mistakes, and not saying that people are right or justified in what they do. I just always look at it like we do all make mistakes. And I couldn't imagine being called out publicly on several different platforms for a mistake that I made. And again, I think it goes back to your point, James, in regards to what it is, but some things, I don't know. I just really think people just jump on bandwagons. They don't even have a clue of what's going, and it doesn't even impact them. They're not really that mad about it. But I think it's become a thing now, an energy that we just jump on these canceling of whoever. And I just find it very interesting. So, Carlos, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I think when it comes down to the how dare you, I think most of the time though, I think the how dare you is how dare you not understand that these situations are happening? Like how dare you not be as quote unquote woke as I am? How dare you think that you can say these things publicly and then get away with them? How dare you not educate yourself on these things? Like I think ultimately what's going to happen is that when we begin to have these or foster these conversations about cancel culture, and then you begin to say, all right, are we going to cancel this person or are we going to educate this person? Most of the time, people that are for cancel culture are going to articulate and say, well, how are they not aware? Right? How do they not have this information readily, available to them? Why do they not know that they're on social media like I'm on social media? They should be educated, and if you are educated, you need to learn from others' mistakes. There's no excuse for you to get canceled now if you see others go down the same path. Well, on the other side of it, though, it's like, well, this is who I am, and I'm trying to articulate, and maybe I have not been educated the way in which you see fit. I think cancel culture really comes down to the individual that sparks it, or the individual that loves the change, or wants to, quote unquote, hold someone else accountable without really educating everyone else on why they're doing it. And I think a lot of the times people will get mad about it. It's just like, with President Trump and Goya, right? Like at the end of the day, there's reports and there's findings. As you can see, the president and operator of Goya has supported both Democrat and Republican, right? But nevertheless, since he decided to support Trump, then it was okay. Let's cancel Goya. Well, to be honest with you, I've never had anything. So I don't have to jump on a bandwagon and be like, cancel Goya. Like if that, and I think that's what the article was talking about, and the writers was talking about, the New York Times. And James, you can empathize with this. Is that we need to have the ability to have public discourse, but do it in a respectable manner.
Yes.
It comes down to you. Listen, there's a position for Breitbart, and then there's other locations, there's other news outlets that that you should go to get your balance. It really depends on you. But at the end of the day, when it leaves from being something that something that is articulable, or things that can be spoken or expounded upon through facts, and it all becomes emotion, then that's when we lose the ability to ask people or demand people to grow. We can't demand people to grow when it's just emotion. Right? Yeah. We have to have the ability to say, let's take the emotion out of it. Let's say what we did wrong. Let's grow from it. Or let me at least give you my opinion why I thought it was wrong. Why did you think it was right? And then move from there.
I think it comes down to leadership
opinion
too, right?
Is the key word there.
If you've got a leadership position, I think if people follow you, you end up with this thought that everybody thinks like you do. So if people are following you, you're like, oh, well, they must understand too. But you never took the time to actually say why you're doing what you're doing. They're following you because you're cool, or they think you're cool, or and so as leaders, sometimes you have to be careful.
Yeah,
exactly.
And hey guys, I gotta jump off. I got my other show in a few minutes.
Yes, you want to tell us your show, Jason? Bamboozled.
It's Bamboozled. It starts at 8:30. I don't want to take anybody away from you though. So no. Thank you so much for having me on, and we'll do it again sometime. Okay.
Yes, thank you, Jason. Have a good show.
Thank you, Jason.
Yeah, and for me, I guess my question is, are we still allowed to have opinions? Because we all aren't going to think alike, and I feel like we're going down a slippery slope for me. Now, some things, of course, by society standards, are things that aren't supposed to be said. You know, we should be more sensitive, especially when you hold a certain platform position. But I feel like sometimes we're getting away from everybody having their own individual thoughts, you know, and where if somebody thinks differently than then I'm allowed to be upset with them and call them out for thinking differently. Everybody is not going to echo your walk, your thoughts, and
Right.
I think we have to be able to agree to disagree sometimes. And I feel like in this culture right now, that's not allowed.
But I would say it's allowed, but it's a time and a place for everything. And that's the issue. What we really have is that now, since we have social media, and I think James brought it up earlier, we believe we can say whatever we want to, and we're not face to face, and we can run away from it, right?
Which
And
is
I can turn off my phone. But at
which
the
is
end of
true.
the day, right? But we were taught, at least I was taught, it's a time and a place. But what you say and what you do behind closed doors, stay behind closed doors. There are no more doors anymore. And so
No,
everyone is willing to go out in front and let their opinions be heard to the masses, and then wonder why everybody doesn't agree with them. You have us, like, listen, I have a brother, me and my mom raised two boys, and we are totally opposites. And we're in the same household, same religion, same everything, but yet we're different. So if we are living in the same household and we're different, what makes you think someone outside your household will hold all the same views that you have? And I think
exactly.
the only thing that I find issue with is that when we begin to record people behind closed doors in their
Yes,
private moments, and then we do cancel culture for that. It's like you may think somebody is quote unquote racist, or you may think somebody is a bigot or misogynistic or what have you, but at the same time, you know they're probably doing it behind closed doors. So I don't have anything to support it, but I'm just going to judge them on a character that I know of them as, right? But
sure.
then what happens is when it comes out and the way it comes out, then it's like, all right, now I got to have a stance. And sometimes, to be quite honest with you, nobody really give a damn about your stance or how you feel right now, right?
That's
And I think too many times social media makes people think everyone cares, and no one really
more than they
doesn't,
do.
unless
More
you think you
than
can
they
have
do.
change.
Yes, that's true. James, you were trying to say something, and then Sarah, you can go next.
Just base something off of that. There are more. There are always going to be more eyes, and this is something that I learned as a print media coming up as a young person starting journalism and going up with it. I was taught very, very young: if it bleeds, it leads.
Yes. Yeah.
There are going to be thousands and hundreds of eyes on your mistake. There
Yeah,
will be tens of eyes on the retraction after that.
Yep.
yeah,
So those principles are basically personified to all of what I and a lot of my journalism friends call the civilians. They don't know the rules of engagement. And unfortunately, you think that you can type something on a keyboard. However, that lives forever with a screenshot.
Yeah.
oh yes,
Yeah.
and people take them real quick.
You
Yes,
have not extended your own time on your mistake,
yeah,
and it can be accessed at any moment. This
yeah,
is the thing that people fear the most of cancel culture, is the fact that now they do have to censor themselves in public because there's no more statute of limitations for a mistake, a
right.
bad moment,
Yeah.
or a
True.
lack of knowledge on a
The
certain
internet never forgets.
situation that everybody likes to talk, because no one wants to be outside of the conversation. So we are
Yeah.
seeing the consequences of entering the media space without the requisite understanding of the consequences that can come after that.
That's very true. That's a very good point. That's very true. Sarah, go ahead. That's very true, James.
So yeah, I'm on board with that. I think because internet never forgets, but people eventually do. I feel like I don't know if this is an inherently American thing, but we have a very like me, like it's my right, it's my First Amendment right to say whatever I want. It's not, but they don't think about what happens outside of that bubble. You know, you get people
Exactly.
who follow their specific groups on Facebook and they get trapped in that bubble. And so but there's this lack of exterior voice. I think that again, that's kind of like what we were talking about. What's the motivation behind the cancel culture? Are you just in your bubble and reacting in the moment because of your personal beliefs? And so being able to step outside of that and think of things empathetically, Like, you know, why am I calling them out? Because I want change on a whole for everyone, because this is problematic for everyone. And I think that we're naturally selfish in a certain way. I mean, we're born that, because like we're the ones that we spend the most time with, of course. But I also try to see my relationships with people, because Aaron, like you were saying about thinking about it, how you would react in your own sphere. I try to see my relationship with people as contact. And so my reactions with you, my interactions with you, Aaron, are based on, you know, what we've been through, what we're currently going through, and what we potentially are going to go through. And I see that like a bank account. And so you deposit into a friendship, you deposit into a society, you deposit into your work. And then there are days where you withdraw. Like, I made a really bad comment and I hurt your feelings, and I was done from that friendship. And like, hey, Aaron, just so you know, you overdrew in there, or Sarah, you overdrew on that friendship. But then you pay back. You have certain people or certain, and that's what I'm talking about, is habitual problematic behavior and language, is now you've bankrupted that friendship. You've bankrupted my goodwill, because you keep withdrawing, and there's no payback. There's no deposit back into that relationship. So I've had personal friends that, you know, have been canceled because they've bankrupted that friendship. And so I think that that's what I want to get to. I want to stop the pendulum swings of like, no, shush, don't talk about it. And we're going to talk about it. We're going to be mad about it, and find that middle ground of like, okay, but how do we balance of that relationship between you and me and society? And so like, I think what happens is we're angry. We want to yell out, want to like call them out in that moment. But that energy is going to be matched by the opposite side. Like he was talking about earlier about, you know, how dare you? If you come at me with a bunch of energy and I don't feel like it's proportionate to my response, then my reaction is going to be to shut down and get defensive. Right. And I think we just need to bring that energy down and say, okay, but this is what happened. Let's have a conversation about it, and then figure it out from there.
Can you do that on a big platform though? I mean, you know, person to person, like, you know, personal relationships here, you know, if Carlos was to offend me, I could go to him personally and say, hey, you offended me. He could try to make it right. He could explain why he did what he did, or, you know, what. But when you have these large, I mean, think about like what we just had recently with Nick Cannon, you know, where, you know, I mean, he's been given back for a very long time, right? And he said some things, you know, in regards to the Jewish community, and, you know, then he instantly was canceled by a large, you know, a lot of people. So, I mean, what do you guys think about that? You know, again, person to person is different, and I totally get what you're saying, because I always try to give people space to correct a mistake, because we all make mistakes.
Right. I would say that person to person is where it starts.
Sure.
Because my mentality started person to person. We just have a bigger platform with social media, and so it's easier to lump onto that. But I think if we start bringing that temperature down on an individual basis, and we create a mob mentality of like, let's chill out and talk about it, hopefully, you know, so I think it starts on an individual basis. How I live my life and the people I interact with, those relationships grow, and then, you know, you set the temperature of the environment that you want. And I think that if we as a nation, as a country, have more people who are setting that temperature of like not ignoring it but not canceling it and getting into that middle road, I think that's gonna be the new shift in that pendulum swing. So we've got from no shush, don't talk about it, to we're gonna talk about it, we're gonna be angry about it. I think hopefully that we start bringing that balance into it just by having conversations like this, one conversation at a time.
One conversation at a time.
For me, I would say that we have to first understand where cancel culture really gained most of its steam, right? Cancel culture gained most of its steam from Black Twitter, right?
Yes, and that's where it kind of,
and it actually right, and it actually was started to bring awareness and attention to those either individuals, politicians, businesses that did not support the marginalized people, more in particular Black folks, and either their trials in either their trials and tribulations or their support or their movement, right? And
Right.
so it went from, like most things, it goes from a slippery slope from educating and holding us accountable, saying, hey, don't support this business because they are anti, that they are racist in their core, to now it goes after any and everyone if they
Anything.
decide to mess up. But that's normally how things go when you're dealing with the disenfranchised folks. Whenever we come up with something, or we find a way to educate each other, it is then taken over by the masses. And when that occurs, then we have no control over it. So then anyone can be canceled or anyone can be redirected. And so long as we start understanding like where it really comes from, because although in 2015, around that time, Black Twitter made it popular, we can't forget about McCarthyism. Right, we can't forget what happened with the smear campaign with the Black Panthers and Medgar Evers and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not something that is new. History always repeats itself, but it's about to what extent, right?
Yeah.
And when it comes down to it, really, cancel culture is essentially systematic racism in reverse. At least in its attempt to be in reverse when it comes to trying to hold people accountable. But at the end of the day, if you're not in the boardroom, if you're not signing those checks, it's tough to cancel anyone.
All right. Okay. All right. James, you got something to add to that?
What a lot of folks I discuss this topic with, and I have come at the end of our conversation with this topic, is, do we just have a cancel culture conversation, or do we have an attack culture conversation? It is, are we operating on the grounds of, I'm looking for opportunities to attack either communities I don't agree with, marginalized communities, these things, and vice versa? Because every time we do see a cancel situation, there is going to, like, these Black Twitter typified this. We've seen this from Ferguson, to where we were canceling groups of businesses for not being more forceful in their support of marginalized communities. The response to that became paramount to where now there is a counterculture. We saw in Ferguson the counter GoFundMes to the migrant family members. We have this culture also going on simultaneously with cancel culture called attack culture, to where if we do not assess that culture as well, it'll be very hard for us to have empathy in these conversations for one another, because those two things are working in tandem. So when the question is, are we concerned with smearing someone's reputation? In some contexts, we do see cancel culture come into play for the express purpose as to smear someone's reputation. When that's the function, it's very difficult to assess where there are actionable items to move towards positivity if the intent starts out as negative.
Right.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think there's always, for me, I always look for a teachable or a learning moment, opportunities. And I just feel like a lot of times as a society, we are so unforgiving. And I think that goes back to what Sarah was saying about, being empathetic. And sometimes, again, I know there are a lot of people that say some just awful, ugly things, and they should be held accountable for that. I mean, we all should be held accountable for what we say and what we do. But I just feel like as a society, we crucify folk, man. And it's like, and it's this like, we have this I'm perfect mentality, and and what you did was so terrible, and we're not perfect. We do stuff all the time. I mean, it's things that I think back 20 years ago that I probably would be ashamed that I said now. I mean, it's just sometimes you say things, and I grew up, and I know other people can probably attest to this. I grew up in a era, so to speak, where people capped. I mean, the stuff that you can't say now was common in your households or at the school rules, or I mean, and I was not good at capping. Okay, I just wasn't good at it. Me, I just hit something. They mess with me enough. I just hit them. I wasn't good at capping. And some people, there's some people that can cap so well, and they can make you cry. I mean, you can really be like, my nose is big and your nose is not big, but they have a way of doing it to where you can really second guess yourself. And my point in saying is that just that growing up, you had to have tough skin. I'm not saying it was right, but it just was what it was. I mean, you had, I mean, your uncle, your cousins, your parents. I mean, they might say stuff to you, but now everybody is so like, I hate using the word sensitive, but that's for lack of a better word. It's a very sensitive time right now where everything you say can get you canceled. And that's where I have a little bit of issue with, because it's like, are we still allowed to, go ahead?
We will see these kind of things as culture shifts, as you were just talking about us. I was young in the 90s. I mean, I'm an 82 baby, so I was 8 when it was 1990. The things that we would say and that I heard from my older siblings, friends, and then the things that we in turn in the late 90s said we knew that those things were not appropriate once 2004, 2005 hit. They were as culture moves into being more inclusive for everyone.
Sure.
There is going to be a cultural tug of war to what is intellectual property, what are offensive, what is not offensive. And we see these things, we see these battles be on all different kind of landscapes, be it political, be it financial, be it social. So there are different arenas that we will be fighting these smaller battles for a while. We'll see cancel culture pop up.
Right.
Sarah, did you have something to add? I thought I saw your. Did you have something to add to that?
I just because I was born in the 80s too, and like, oh man, there's so many movies that I'm like, man, that movie was awesome, and then I'll rewatch it and I go, oh no, like,
yes,
not aged well at all.
So Sarah, I just want to say something real quick, and then I want you to finish your point, because I understand what you're saying. So I am a lover of like theater, and especially musicals, right? I love musicals. You give me, I will sit and watch it over and over again and sing all the parts and do all the moves by myself, right? So I saw that on Hulu, they had the West Side Story. I love the West Side Story, right? And I'm like, oh my goodness, I can never find it. So I saw it was on there. I turned it on and I'm watching it and I'm like, oh my goodness, these are white people that are supposed to look like Hispanic people. And it was just so, because they had darker makeup on, they were trying to speak with this accent. But as a kid, I just loved it, right? But now I'm like, oh my goodness. So it was a whole different feeling watching that movie, seeing how they couldn't have just hired Hispanic people to play the parts because, they're able to sing and dance as well. So I get what you're saying when you say, when you look back at some of the movies, it's like, oh my God, we would never be able to play this now. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, but that part of it is like, there are some things, and I think the other part of cancel culture for me early on, especially with like, I was a huge Kevin Spacey fan. And like those movies, Seven, and like, but he's officially killed me. I can't with Kevin Spacey, but also like, I love those movies, and it's like you finding that space of being able to find a division between the art and the artist, and like, I think the problem with cancel culture, because like what you were talking about, where it started and the need for it come up, and with Black Twitter and having very serious things needing to be addressed, and having that energy of like, no, we're going to address this now, and then other people using that same energy for something that isn't that serious. And so I think muddying the waters as far as how we handle it. So I'm not 100% against cancel culture, but I think using it as default reaction is very problematic. And so like, man, like if I were like Multiplicity, that was one of those movies where I was like, that movie's so funny, and I ordered it, and I like put it in. I was just like, oh no. And if somebody judged me based on this, one of my favorite movies and a recent purchase of mine, because of how I felt about it in the past,
Yes.
Like, would suck.
Yes.
That's hard, and I have to deal with that. But again, it's the energy that comes at me is like, we're canceling Sarah now because she liked that movie. Like, now I'm going to get defensive and going to have, like, my energy is going to be different and wrong. And it's, I don't know. So I don't just necessarily, you know, if this fits here, but one of my favorite, as far as leadership goes, my favorite analogy is there are thermostat people and thermometer people. There are people who set the temperature of the room, and there are people who select the temperature of the room, which I think feeds into that mob mentality. So you have to be mindful of who your thermostat people are. Like, I think I'm a thermostat person. I like to walk into a room, especially Aaron, you know, I've done here with your son, and I was the makeup artist. If you come into the makeup room and chill with me, like, I'm setting that temperature. You're not coming in here with your bad energy. Like, this is happy, good space. And so, like, I set my own temperature in my world, but I also, there are thermostat people that I follow, and I try to make sure that they're well-balanced, thoughtful, mindful people. And then there are thermometer people who are just going to reflect the temperature of the room for whoever, you know, is setting that pace. And so you have, you know, celebrities and stuff like that who are like, we're canceling so-and-so, and then people just want to reflect that temperature. And so it's a difficult situation. It's
a hard balance.
Because it's all emotions. Yeah.
It is.
And
it really is. It really is. No, you're right. You're right. Anybody want to add something to that?
I'm good.
Okay. You know, Sarah, what you stated is so true for me in regards to, you know, not being so emotional all the time. Like, sometimes we have to kind of take a step back and just reassess things and kind of look at things a little bit differently, because again, if I was judged on some movies that I liked, I mean, we're just using that as an example, but sometimes that's how it happens, right? It's like, oh, 20 years ago, this person did this, you know, and at that time in society, as wrong as it is, that was seen as acceptable, right? And again, I'm not making excuses for it. I'm just saying that at that time, it may have been acceptable and wasn't frowned upon as much. And I mean, just like with wearing seatbelts, I mean, I'm just throwing that out there. You know, now it's like you can get a ticket and fined for not having on a seatbelt. But before, you know, down south, I mean, you'd have 15 people in the car and hanging off the back of the truck, you know, and, you know, it was okay. I mean, so my point is that we evolve as a society. And I think that, you know, we have to give people a little bit more compassion at times. There's some things that, you know, I just can't stand beside, you know, and of course, I mean, some things that I'm like, no. So, and also my last question, I'll let you guys go. Is cancel culture a way of, you know, just holding each other accountable, right? I mean, and I think we kind of touched on this a little bit, but is this a way to hold each other accountable? Because if I know I'm in the public eye, or, you know, a celebrity, whoever is in, you know, public eye, and certain things that you say, people are dissecting it. I mean, you could just say, it's hot outside, and people will try to dissect that. Well, it's not quite hot. It's just, you know, people, you find out it takes all kinds, you know. So is this a way for us to hold each other accountable?
Yes. I think that there is, yeah. Sorry.
Go ahead, James.
James.
Yes, short answer. It is cancel culture, like we said, is historically has been a thing, will always be a thing. It is a way society essentially corrects itself into one specific and moving direction and one goal. So it will always be a unfortunate necessity in some cases. In some cases, going to be a positive duty. It will just depend on how we as a culture treat each other with maneuvering those difficult conversations.
Yeah.
Right.
Very true.
And I totally agree. And my stance is this: cancel culture is a tool of accountability. It's not so much accountability, but it's a tool of it. Because even though you want to be the leader and start counseling people for things they have done or things they have said, Nevertheless, you have to understand that, you got to understand who you are, understand why you want to cancel them. Because at the end of the day, you're using your tool to the best of your ability to try to hold someone else accountable. But while trying to hold them accountable, I think like Sarah said earlier, are you trying to call them out to educate them? Or do you really just want to get rid of them and try to hurt them? Like the old adage is, hurt people hurt people. And so if somebody is hurt because of your statement or your actions, and then their repercussions are going to be all emotional and just try to hurt you. But can we get to the spot? Can we get to the place in which we use that tool to now, instead of just holding someone accountable, it also provides a solution. So if cancel culture can develop and evolve into more solution-oriented bases that are educating folks and then move forward, then I think we'll be in a good place. The only issue is that, for some people, they have people that they have said these things to before, or they have others that believe in some of the things that they're saying or typing or, feeling or doing that are not holding them accountable. And so sometimes others, don't have patience for it. And so, I wish people use it as a tool and then understand that tool has a time in this place.
Yep. And once we make them aware, if a person keep doing it, then that's a whole nother beast. Because if you just blatantly want to just keep, acting a fool, then we have to hold you accountable, and that's just real. So, but I do believe in giving people opportunity to redeem themselves, because we all should be afforded that. But if you just kind of are creating a pattern, then yes. So, did anybody have any last words in regards to cancel culture or anything that we spoke about?
Please think critically about everything you read, hear, and see.
Do some research too. Sorry.
Then after you think critically, empathize, allow for a path back. I know there will be some things that will be a hard thing to ask for.
Sure.
But if we become a society that is a more forgiving society, it does quicken our appeal.
I would say just be responsible for your tweets and your statuses and what you post on social media.
Yeah, because you'll be held accountable for it.
Yeah.
Sarah?
I would say that we need to be pragmatic, but also we're allowed to feel what we feel. I mean, emotions are valid. We're just not allowed to let them run away with it. But pragmatic and empathetic. But I think that, cancel culture comes from a lack of satisfaction from systems that we already have in place. So like our justice system and our political systems, like we have problems with how those systems are set up. So we created a different solution that becomes extreme and becomes problematic. So I feel like we shift energy from, okay, this was created out of a need for justice. Let's now take that energy and refocus into figuring out why our justice system doesn't work. Why are we feeling so dissatisfied with the way our justice system works? And then take pragmatic steps to fix that problem. It's exposed a problem, and we're having that, that volatile emotional reaction to it now. Let's let our emotions subside and think about it pragmatically and how we can actually fix it in a sustainable way.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. I agree with all points. I really appreciate you guys for coming on and having this conversation. This has been something that I really wanted to talk about, because it's just every day I wake up, I feel like somebody's getting canceled. And I think to James's point a little bit, I don't think that people always do their due diligence or their own research. Sometimes we just jump on things and don't really look into things to kind of see, well, what happened? What was going on? And again, this is not making excuses, but sometimes on some levels, it's like, do you even know what's happening right now before you're, retweeting or, sharing a post? So I think that we need to be, do our own research first before we aid in that, canceling of someone, because we have a responsibility then too. When we kind of add into it, that becomes some of our responsibility too, if that person loses their job or things of that nature. So again, thank you guys so much. I'm really sad that Taylor wasn't able to hear us, because I know he was very passionate about this and had some points that he wanted to share. So hopefully, maybe he can come back another time and we can talk about it a little bit more, because this is such a a big subject, you know, and there's so much things that we can cover with this. It's so broad, right? So again, thank you guys so much. I appreciate everybody's input and your time. You know, you guys all came from like different perspectives of it, which was really cool to add into the conversation. Like James, you know, you're a media guy, a journalist, so you see things totally different than, you know, me, who's just saying just get rid of them. So I appreciate all your perspectives. So you guys have a great evening, and yep, and Carlos has a show. So Carlos, you want to plug your show real quick? I like plugging. Let's go.
Most definitely. Listen, I host a show. It's called Next Play Show, Next Play Podcast. I'm the host, and my co-host is Lamar Willie. We're on 9:10 a.m. Superstation down in Detroit, as well as we'll go live on our Next Play Consultant LLC.com, and you can follow us either on Twitter, Next Play Consultant LLC.com, or you can follow Lamar Willie at Lamar Willie or Carlos McMath at Coach Los. You know, like we say, everybody's catching plays. Get to the next play.
There we go. All right. We got to put those plugs in. We got to support each other. It takes a village. So you guys have a great evening. And again, thanks so much.
Thank you. You have a good one.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Wow, that was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. I really appreciate everybody that was able to come on. Jason had to leave early. He has his show that started about 11 minutes ago called Bamboozle. And then Taylor had a little bit of technical difficulties, but I know he was very passionate about speaking about cancel culture as well. So I appreciate everyone for taking the time to come on. Thank you guys so much for watching. And you guys have a great evening, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.